Hey, if you're hearing this, you're watching part 2 of a 2-part video. While you don't need to watch part 1, I do highly suggest to get the best idea of what I'm getting at, as well as the structure for this video. If not, well, enjoy! But considering that, there's one more thing I need to point out. You ever get that awkward feeling when someone you talk about shows up in your comment section, and they actually act civil and talk to you about your video? Yeah, well, to make sure I'm not being dishonest, I should point out that Sarah Z made a twit longer about the Lily Orchard situation that I'll be updating the original video's description, and throw a link to that in this one, so that it's important to talk about the context in regard to that. And hey, I do want to be fair to her. She did come to my video and again was respectful to me. So this part wasn't originally in my script, but I figured it'd be a good idea to talk about it and expand on the topic of misinformation. And there is reasons for why there's misinformation in media criticism. This does not mean that these are the only reasons, but these are some of the most common that I see. Sometimes it can be as simple as egotism.
Now, I'm not saying I'm right about everything. Just most things.
I mean, who doesn't want to put that ego on a pedestal? For example, in the case of Jim Sterling, who's cosplaying as Plague Knight's emo cousin.
It is I, the steam cleaner!
Now, I understand it's part of his character, and, you know, there's a certain charm to that.
This is a real hardcore game!
It's official. Definitely having nightmares tonight.
And it's not to dismiss all of his points as being wrong, but there are times where that egotism does show. And I'm not going to deny that it can be entertaining, and he has done work for the industry, but that's not going to stop me from pointing out some egotism and issues. Like when he talked about the Steam Store and Epic Store, pretty much demonizing Steam in the process for having a few handful of shovelware games and making the situation out to be a lot worse than it was. For someone claiming that he's pro-consumer, Jim actually shows that any game that he finds offensive, or any journalists who find it offensive, believe that they have no right to a platform, and if a platform does give it to them, as in the case with Steam, they will demonize Steam.
Aside from not risking your game listed in the same space as a school shooting game, aside from the generous revenue split, aside from the waiving of Unreal Engine royalties, the Epic Store is just straight up not filled with fucking garbage that pushes genuine games out of the spotlight. Epic doesn't have a feature that lets developers continually and endlessly alter their release dates to keep pushing their games right back to the top of the pile over and over.
Because of this agenda and ego pushing, Jim completely ignores all the flaws the Epic Store had. I mean, Steam isn't perfect, I'll be the first one to say, but at least Steam had a search bar. What I keep hearing, Epic Games didn't have one when they first started up.
How do you do that?
Oh, and there's much more. Many reasons why Epic Games can be considered horrible. Now, some of these may have been fixed, because what I'm hearing is that apparently Epic Store is slowly implementing these features into their system, but here's a reason why. Let's go! The lack of cloud saving, having to be connected to the internet at all times, no controller support, no regional pricing, the inability to chat with friends, lack of user profiles, Linux support, screenshots, streaming support, no user reviews. That last one was a bit more concerning since the company's founder had said that there was a review system in the works since December, but it'll be opt-in by developers. Basically giving developers the ability to remove opinions that may hurt the game in the developer's eyes, or to disable reviews to shield themselves from criticism. Again, for someone who claims to be pro-consumer, this is one of the worst things for the consumer, Jim. And you're willing to misinform your audience just because of that egotism. That your morality is greater, that your opinion on Steam is that it's bad for hosting these games. I'm not even disagreeing that Steam needs to do better with the various regards, like, you know, they shouldn't be taking a 30% cut from game developers. But my issue is that you're putting Epic Games Store on a pedestal, when so many issues are anti-consumer and could actually hurt developers who decide to go with Epic Games due to the fact that it's being anti-consumer so much. Still shows my point that sometimes ego can be a reason why things can be wrong in media criticism. Another is trying to be steadfast in a point you made. So unlike most of the other examples I'm going for, I figured I'd go for a smaller example from a guy named Endless Jess.
Know what I'm talking about when I say the following. The game sucks and the original was better.
To put it out there, someone sent me this and wanted me to make a commentary on it, but there were a number of points I actually agreed with him, as I have played the game multiple times myself, if not finding some of his comedy to be a bit eye-rolling. I know, rich for me to say, but there are a few points and it stems from this.
Worst of all, the zombies in this game respawn. Yeah, they respawn. At least I think they do. I'm not talking about the ones who come in through the windows. I'm not stupid. I know how to block the windows. I swear to you, the zombies respawn. I can't prove it, but I know it in my heart.
Spoilers, I guess. And he bases this off the character of Marvin, who, if you're not aware of in the game of Resident Evil 2, is a zombie who respawns, and he's the only one.
Some of you are probably crying foul right now, asking me how I can possibly know for certain that they're respawning when you could just as easily suspend your disbelief and assume they're new zombies. I'll tell you, the answer is Marvin. Aha! Turns out I can prove it. There is only one Marvin. He is not a repeating model, because that wouldn't make sense. He's only in one area, because he's a real character who happens to go hollow at a certain point and begins shambling about the main hall. You can put him down and kill him, you can blow his fucking head off, and when you come back, he'll be back too. Confirming my theory that the zombies are in fact respawning! Unless I'm wrong and it's just him.
And he goes back to this point, especially when he talks about the plant enemies.
Because these bad time vines are like a perfect trifecta of everything I hate about the enemies in this game. First, they respawn. You cannot kill them permanently. Leave the room and come back and they will get up. Second, you better believe you gotta aim at their stupid weak spots. This time it's little pus sacks like the birthing tree in Dark Souls 3. Except here it's even worse because you have to aim at them while they wriggle around and do Groot stuff. You can get around this if you have grenade launcher or flamethrower ammo, but if you don't, it's almost better to let them hit you and hope you have a grenade to shove in their mouths.
What's really funny is you actually watch his footage and you're somewhat familiar with the game and have played through it at least once or twice. You can tell that he's using acid rounds. The game outright tells you that with a note in the lab that the only way to kill these things is with fire.
Somebody's note. Everybody's turned vegified. They keep coming back again and again. Burn them all. Burn them until their whole body is black with ash. There's no other way. Okay, well, I've been doing that.
Which, not for naught, really makes me wonder how you missed the note 5 times.
I actually did sorta get invested in this one, enough to play through it a modest 5 times. Even attaining the fabled S+ rank, so you know I'm a badass.
I fail to see the logic here.
I mean, there's also the fact it's just common sense. I mean, if Pokemon can figure this out, I think anyone who can play this game can figure it out. I don't know, it's just more jarring than learning that a Nostalgia Critic was actually in a game where you're fighting enemies.
Hello, I'm the Nostalgia. You cannot remember it, so you don't have...
Once again, I actually do agree with Endless Jest on a few of his points, but it's something to bring up. And then there's this big part, the idea of fulfilling an agenda. So there's this one guy who made a video defending Dark Souls 2, and you might actually know him because he's on the bloody thumbnail.
That's not to say the video is literally to blame for negativity towards Dark Souls 2, but regardless, it is necessary that this critique be defeated and destroyed at all costs.
And when you're defending something, one of the best ways to go about this is to actually challenge preconceived notions. And at the base core, there's nothing wrong with that. If there's a criticism of something you think is wrong and you can prove it to be wrong, go for it. That's perfectly fine. The problem, however, for me is when the guy decides to take mathematosis out of context in order to fulfill that goal.
Mechanics of the Souls games are built for one-on-one engagements, thanks to its slow attack animations, which are uninterruptible once they start, and a lock-on camera, which focuses heavily on a single foe.
This early criticism is an interesting one. The claim is that adding more enemies into the game and also into some boss fights is a lazy attempt to increase difficulty, and that this is bad because Souls games are specifically designed to work best against single enemy encounters.
Adding more enemies into the game and also into some boss fights is a lazy attempt to increase difficulty. It isn't that simple, especially considering how Matt breaks it down in his own video. Watch the part that Harris cut out.
In Dark Souls 2, the number of bosses with multiple enemies jumps to 11, 12 if we include Dark Lurker, most of which feel as lazily designed as the Capra Demon encounter. Rather than make the Freya fight difficult by giving her a challenging moveset, the designers just drop some random spiders into the battle instead. The epitome of this lazy mindset is the Belfry Gargoyles, a copy-pasted setup except this time there can be more of them active at once. This all might have been fine, except it doesn't play to the series' strengths whatsoever.
This clip is between the 2 clips that Harris has provided. The reason that it is important to keep this part in is that Matt mentions several supporting pieces of evidence for his argument. First, that having multiple enemy boss fights is less preferable, if poorly designed, than the sole enemy boss fights. And yet there are 11 in Dark Souls 2. This is because focusing on one target naturally means you have to gamble with the other target, sometimes.
Now you may be wondering, why haven't I said his name yet? Well, that's because he's in the next part.
Price to pay for power?
It's kinda wild now to think that with the growing popularity of sites like YouTube, literally anybody can call himself a critic. Even you, watching right now, if you wanted to, you can make criticism videos about various types of media and refer to yourself as a critic. And we've seen this with channels like I Hate Everything, Your Movie Sucks, and Ralph the Movie Maker. I've seen a pretty good point be brought up a few times with these guys, being, why should we listen to their opinions? They're just random guys. And it raises the question of why do we even take these people's opinions seriously? Especially when it's about a piece of media that they've never tried to get involved in. To this day, I'm still surprised that anyone takes the opinions of someone like Doug Walker, the nostalgia critic, seriously. Someone who's built his entire career off being a film critic, yet every single time he's decided to make a film, it hasn't been anything above complete shit. So why do people take his opinion seriously? Honestly, couldn't tell you. Maybe his large subscriber count makes people think that he has some kind of authority on film quality, but I don't know. In a review of The Emoji Movie, a film which everyone under the sun was relentlessly bashing at the time, Max G of Hot Diggity Demon said something that really stuck with me. It was something along the lines of, if you can't prove that if given the same opportunity, you could have done better, then you have no authority on anything and your opinion is worthless. And it's a point that I completely agree with. If someone like Doug Walker can't prove to me in his many attempts at making a film that he can't make anything even close to average, then I should have no respect for him as a critic. But the line is sort of blurred when we look at someone like I Hate Everything, who's never really shown that he himself can make a good movie, yet acts like we're supposed to trust his opinions as a movie critic, and I can't really say I have a definitive answer on that. I guess we just have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
More than likely, the reason you clicked on this video is because of the title and depending on who was in the thumbnail. I mean, at this point in the script writing, I really haven't decided what the thumbnail looks like, but if I had to hazard a guess, I'm pretty sure I put the guy who more than likely inspired that horrible live-action Sonic movie. H-Bomber Guy. If you're at all familiar with the title of this video, or videos like, you're more than likely to know what I'm about to say about this. He was the guy who pretty much coined the video format of, hey, this thing you like is garbage, and I'm gonna tell you why and crush your hopes and dreams and tell you that you've got terrible taste and that your mom doesn't love you and But yeah, Harris here inspired a lot of people to adopt the format. After all, not only does the title frame the video to be a match to spark up attention, both from the people who agree with the notion that the subject matter is garbage, because people like to have their confirmation bias be backed up, and from the people who are fans and will more than likely go to defend the product that they have some sort of connection to. These are extreme examples and shouldn't be painted as though they are the only people who do watch these sorts of videos. Far from it. However, it's safe to believe that the goal with these titles is to attract attention from those who would disagree with the premise and those who do agree with it. You need only look at things like Steven Universe, Fallout, or whatever has a huge following, preferably one that has a rabid fanbase and something that has roots in Tumblr. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Sure, I myself can find that to be a bit underhanded tactic in order to get views on YouTube, but it's understandable considering the way YouTube often likes to bend its creatives over and Point is, something I don't fully agree with, but something I can understand. Hell, I have to understand it's something that needs to be done. You're watching a video where I blatantly titled it after those styles of videos. I'd be a bloody hypocrite if I wasn't okay with it on some level. However, there's a reason why we're talking about these sorts of videos in the context of this one, and that's because I happen to find flaws in them. I can also extend this to be flaws I notice with a lot more long formatted content, not just garbage videos. The first thing is a lack of a manuscript. That's not me saying that I'm referring to people who make these long-form videos don't make scripts, but rather I'm referring to the ability to actually provide said manuscripts with their videos. Let's say that you hold an issue with something that a YouTube essayist says, and you want to quote them directly without misremembering the quote and don't want to cut context. Unless you've taken prior notes from the timestamps or you can't completely understand what a person is saying, it can be a daunting task to make sure you don't take people out of context. Yes, it can be done, but providing a manuscript to the audience should make it easier for people to refer to, especially if misquoting is an issue that the video maker holds problems with. Hell, more than likely, if you go down to my description right now, you'll see a link to my Google Doc that has this video script in it so you can make sure that my words are the ones you're hearing right now are the same as I'm typing out. For the most part. You jerks. Again, this is something that I find fault with, especially if you've got videos that happen to border on the 2 or 3 hour in length and you take issue with. Going back to Joseph Anderson, God fucking damn it! If you look towards his Soma and Horror Night videos, he'll provide a script for those videos. Meanwhile, a number of his other videos like Mario Odyssey, God of War, and Subnautica, his more recent long-string reviews, no such luck. I went to his Patreon to see if he offered the scripts as rewards now, and
whoop, there it goes. Yep, my brain stopped.
Also, side note, $5 to have your name in the credits? That's a bit of a rip-off, JoJo. Now that we've got the minor issue with these sorts of videos out of the way, let's get to the actual issues that I have with these videos. The three main issues I hold with these videos have to be the following. 1. Inconsistencies. 2. Sources or lack of them. And 3. Presentation of expression. So this is the part where I finally get to talk about Lily Orchard's Steven Universe video, and I will be referring to a creator by Grandpa Glasses who made a full-blown response to Lily's video. And it's a video I would recommend if you've got about 90 minutes to kill, have an interest in Steven Universe, or just don't like Lily. I wouldn't blame you for that. As for why I'm referring to Lily's videos rather than H-Bomber Guy's, for one thing, Lily has taken an obvious emulation from H-Bomber Guy, to even taking quotes and points that he's made in his videos.
Final confrontation with the Master is incredibly nuanced and speaks to the quality of the writing in the original Fallout, a quality that the series has been sorely lacking as of late. We don't see villains that well planned out. The Master is essentially a mutated Hitler, but unlike a lot of analogies to Hitler, his motives and reasons for his actions are carefully explained. Hell, the real Hitler wasn't as nuanced as the Master was. The rest of the Wasteland doesn't want to live under the Unity's rule, but the Master doesn't care. If you want to talk him down, you have to prove to him that his goal isn't going to work, that it's a failure, a waste. Your only other option is to kill him. Badly written villains never explain themselves beyond platitudes.
You know what that sounds like?
Because there are no obvious speech options popping up with percentiles, there's no way of telling what the best way of attempting to talk him down might be, except for your own judgment. You have to engage him as a reasonable person. The best thing is, it's impossible for him to be talked down on moral grounds. He doesn't care about mankind's survival or killing people because for him, the mutants are the future of mankind and the ends justify the means. The only way to talk him down is to explain why the plan wouldn't work.
And a bit of...
The Master had a comprehensive explanation for why the human race needed to be converted into mutants now. Bethesda can't come up with a single compelling explanation for why this is actually a good idea beyond the platitude of, we need to undo mutants, do you get it? I'm a racist. There's no philosophical struggle.
Yeah, so next time you want to rip something off, be sure not to also take a $5 word that nobody uses in day-to-day conversation. We now return you to...
And to be completely honest, once I started listening to Harris for a while, his smarminess and British accent was enough to make me eye up that razor that I got near my bathroom sink just to end it all. So let's talk about inconsistencies.
Notable that this is the first time Lily has mentioned writing problems that don't stem from Sugar, so the discrepancy here feels a lot more blatant than it usually would. Like, if you're aware that an entire team of people are contributing to the show, why do you keep scapegoating Sugar for every problem with it? The fact you keep playing into this vitriol leads to a lot of contradictions, as demonstrated right here.
Anytime something looks like it might happen, Sugar bullshits her way out of it. The show just doesn't have any writers.
Either the show has no writers, which is false, or the show does have writers and you disagree with the choice.
It should be obvious why this is a bad thing, as it can make the creator of these come off as playing with a bias and make the analysis not as tight as they can. And it's like this isn't the only time Lily does this in her video. So just bringing up certain episodes, but then cutting out certain episodes that go against her points.
Evidently happened was Lapis found a new victim, but because Sugar continues to write the character she thinks she wrote, rather than the one that she actually wrote, and has an understanding of views on par with Dr. Wolf, this all goes unaddressed and more time is spent reinforcing how sad and angsty Lapis is. This all comes to a very heated conclusion in Raising the Bar, where the fear of being caught up in another war makes Lapis want to leave Earth. The entire episode is one long string of Lapis being the fucking worst, but a personal highlight goes to this scene.
I can't. I won't let myself get caught up in another war.
So then, two problems. The first is that Lily never explains why Lapis has such animosity towards Peridot and Barnmans, which is directly confronted and addressed in the episode multiple times, including the muted clips Lily manipulated via editing to look worse. Let me show you.
You used me like everyone else did, but it's not like that anymore. It's different now. I'm different. I'm gonna tape recorder too! Look, I get it, you know. You're confused. You can never go back to homeworld. This life doesn't exactly feel like home yet. You're alone. No one could possibly know what that feels like. Oh wait, I do.
You trust her, Steven?
Because I know her. Lapis, you're not even giving her a chance. You should have at least gotten to know her before you decided you don't like her.
Peridot, are you okay?
This was how their relationship was at the very start. By moving this Raising the Barn clip to be right after discussing barnmates, you perhaps unintentionally tricked your audience into thinking Lapis never changed her behavior towards Peridot.
Heck, this video goes against what Lily has said in another one of her videos, basically talking about the same subject matter and had some evidence behind it.
In the glass of water video that you briefly reference, you correctly point to Cartoon Network being at fault here, not Rebecca Sugar.
What reason does a company like Cartoon Network have to spread out releases like this? Hype mongering. Looking at the ratings for each Steven Bomb has shown that the first 2 Steven bombs saw spikes in ratings, but each subsequent Steven bomb leveled out unless it contained a special episode. If you believe that it's all Cartoon Network's doing for the constant hiatuses, which I don't, what reason does a company like Cartoon Network have to spread out releases like this? Which I don't. What reason does a company like
It's a common trend that Lily likes to attribute to almost everything to Rebecca Sugar, even things that are out of her control, and one of the worst examples involves the art book that I pointed out earlier in this video, one of them being the aspect of including animation and storyboarding of a certain episode, citing claim and failing to understand it.
One person from Trigger was brought on to do the storyboards. Not animate, the storyboards. Mindful Education, which had a guest storyboard artist, has much cleaner and consistent storyboards that do the job they're supposed to do and communicate with the animators. Mindful Education brought on Takafumi Hori as the lead storyboard artist, and who were the lead storyboard artists in most episodes? I'm shocked. Truly I am. This is my shocked face.
The storyboards were then handed to Hori-san, and he did beautifully detailed cleanups of the panels and added extra poses for animation. He also did some masterful work on the action sequence in My Partner, Colin Howard's boards. These drawings were finally sent to Cinema Image Pictures to be skillfully animated and colored into the final product.
And looking at the accompanying keyframes, we can confirm this is indeed the case, with Takafumi Hori making a very specific correction to Vani's stance in regards to Hollow Pearl. Now, why would Lily use a wrong storyboard when discussing Takafumi Hori's storyboard specifically? And why would she lie and say Takafumi Hori didn't do some key animation for scenes in this episode?
Congratulations! You just pulled a Matt Pat! That's the problem. If your claims can be disproven by your own sources, then it shows that you're willing to cherry-pick examples, not actually take into account information that could help with your analysis as well as push an agenda. More than likely, I'll get people commenting that I'm doing the same thing, even though I'm citing my sources and such, as well as providing links so you can find information that's discussing it. This can also include quotes from creators of a work. And finally, that refers to my final issue with the presentation of expression. One of the most iconic things you can glean from Lee's video is the part where she says at the 1 hour and 52 minute mark.
Let's get down to the bare bones of this, since I know this is what everyone is going to be quote mining. Do I think Rebecca Sugar is a fascist sympathizer? No. Do I blame anybody who comes to the conclusion that she is based on Steven Universe's content? No. I maintain that Rebecca Sugar remains completely unaware of the implications of her writing because she's just not paying attention outside of her very specific goals.
Unfortunately, because a good portion of Lily's video is based on Lily's implications that she herself read into it, a number of times based on false information and information that Lily refuses to cite, and is continuously lambasting Rebecca Sugar throughout the video, really leaves an odd taste in my mouth. It's also that she can use it to quote mine and attempt to make it seem that she doesn't believe the things she spent the better portion of 2 hours trying to make apparent.
Sugar, you are such a creep!
And don't think this to mean that Lily is the only person who does this. I can point to people like Joseph Anderson, and how he'll misinterpret a game's mechanics or parts of a game in order to push a narrative that he's trying to sell to his audience. And you may be asking, why do I find this to be an issue? The expression. And this will tie into the next chapter, but it's important that I talk about it here. When people make claims, they will often frame their opinions with objective language, backing up their claims with evidence. It's par for the course. I've actually done it in this video too. However, the issue comes when these points aren't being framed as opinions, as things that make the author feel something that they bring up. Creators and authors will often try to appeal to their audiences, telling the audience how they should feel or how something should or shouldn't be done. It's how you can get H. Bomber Guy to make a claim like this.
This looks a whole lot like playing the game wrong and blaming the game for it. Matthew is still trying to use the lock-on mechanic in fights even as late as the Watcher and Defender bosses, and he's still using a shield. Aw, bless. Someone really liked the previous games and tried real hard not to unlearn what they learned there.
If these people want to merely express their opinions, then how could they stand to actually go out of their way to make it as if they were their opinions? However, it's not an opinion when what you're backing up your opinion is evidence that can be contradicted and potentially disproven. Again, if I can find your source and prove that you're effectively wrong about the situation, then that's a problem.
Humans, and we're stuck as humans. The chances of us having some bizarre new species-changing evolution are incredibly slim. But squids, on the other hand, are playing by a completely different set of genetic rules. Just this year, in fact, just a couple weeks ago, as we researched this episode, scientists discovered that cephalopods don't follow the normal patterns of protein building with RNA, at least not as strictly as we do.
Alright, you can get from your previous ways, especially from your previous videos. The only difference is instead of turning one of my favorite video game characters into a villain, you're misleading your audience by completely foregoing information from the same source that you're using to back up your points. And I quote, "When the scientists studied octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish, they found that these species had retained those vast swaths of genetic information at the expense of making the small changes that felicitate evolution."
Very few species that has the ability to forget Darwin altogether and evolve at your own pace.
In layman's terms, these creatures' genes barely rarely change as they get passed down from generation to generation, meaning that the DNA mutations that are needed to evolution is limited and actually slows down their evolutionary process. So following your reference, these squids wouldn't be able to evolve in the short amount of time between that they crawled on the land and the events of the game Splatoon.
Made even worse when you don't provide the source yourself, since it can come off as if you're trying to hide the information that could potentially prove you wrong. This is not critical analysis. Critical analysis is making and proving objective claims with reasoning and insight. The presentation of YouTubers will often refer to them making objective statements and their matter of expressing the opinions they make to come off as if them trying to speak factually instead of making an opinion piece. However, that doesn't stop them from defending themselves with a shield of opinion and other acts of defense.
So, media criticism. It's something that's rather common on YouTube, or hell, on any platform really. Even me and MangaKamen do it all the time. However, I feel like media criticism tends to drift a little too close to the category of being subjective. Now, none of us can avoid that, really. I personally don't see how gameplay footage can be boring, honestly. I'm looking at you, Kamen.
Oh yeah, a wise guy, eh?
But that's fine. Nobody's perfect. What isn't fine is using criticism to hide a possible bias, subjective viewpoint, or even hostility towards a topic you may have. Take, for instance, LSMark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Now, Mark, I personally think his content is alright. Not my favorite, but he can have some decent points at times. However, in his video titled Game Grumps Isn't Funny Anymore, at the very beginning, the level of hostility is immediately apparent by the setting of the first few seconds. Basically saying how the fanbase of Game Grumps is hostile and quick to defend their oh lord and savior, when no, they're just as critical of the channel as everyone else. Along with that, he mostly just criticizes Aaron Hansen throughout the video, while also making a somewhat distasteful remark towards his wife. Ugh. He even went out of his way to dig up stuff that Aaron did back in the day, 10 years ago, just to prove a point, when that doesn't prove anything other than Aaron's views might have changed, considering it's been a decade. Videos like these tend to do poorly because of a few things: hostility and bias. Hostility because at the very beginning he makes the fans out to be quick to attack and be overly protective, and bias because he just criticizes Aaron mostly and says maybe one or two comments about the other people on the channel as a whole. So while I don't think it's a major problem that needs solving, it has become a bit more apparent as time went by. Well, was that enough for you, Kamen? I hope so.
You are tearing me apart!
Criticism is obvious on the internet, and despite what some people like to think, just because you say something is an opinion, that doesn't mean you can't get called out for making your opinion out to be objective, how you frame your opinion, or what you say. You see, one of the things I find fascinating about critics on YouTube is how they react to criticism. Now, this isn't to say that everyone reacts in the same ways that I'm about to go over. Not all critics. Hashtag not all critics. Heck, I can point to someone like Super Eyepatch Wolf who responded pretty well to a video by Craft Dwarfs, and I've had people who come to my videos that I've made, people like Birdkeeper Toby, and hell, I've had people come to me asking me to make videos on them. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but before I get into some of the worst ways people have responded to criticism and how they'll defend themselves, I felt it necessary to explain that not every critic reacts in the same ways that I've talked about them. But when it comes to criticism, when people levy their issues of some creators, it can seem as if your words aren't able to make the dent in these people, and these are the tools that they use to accomplish that. One of the first is that people will often resort to is the greatest and most common, and one that I've already spoken about. It was a joke! That's the joke. Before I get into my example to explain this, let me talk about comedy.
Oh! My dick's falling off!
There are near countless ways to perform jokes. Hell, a bad joke told great can make people laugh, but a great joke told poorly can elicit you getting some weird stares from people. Jokes in comedy come down to execution, timing, subject matter, and several other factors, including the audience themselves. And now that I've spoken about that, let's talk about Quentin reviews.
So, here's the thing. I hate Trump.
Another disclaimer, I'm aware that I've talked about Quentin reviews and I've stated that I wouldn't talk about him on my channel unless it was important. But in that regard, I feel like this is probably one of the best examples to talk about it when referring to using jokes as a defense. So some time ago, Quentin went on the State of YouTube podcast. Why he was on there isn't really important to this video, but he says in regards to his video concerning the T-Series vs. PewDiePie situation, which he took down, was this.
As for the whole T-Series video, I realized, here's the reason I took it down. That was growing incredibly fast. It was a smart upload as a business move, and it was going to become my most viewed video, and I don't really care about that whole thing. And I did that video kind of half-caring, being like, I'll make some jokes about this, but I don't think it matters. A lot of people got mad about the situation, telling me it was a bad video because of 1 or 2 points they didn't like. Yeah, and I just want to say, like, people are right in criticizing me for that video and that it wasn't a good video. Like I said, I didn't care about the situation, I just wanted to make some jokes about it, and I thought some of those jokes were funny.
Link to the full podcast down below, but it's something that Quentin will often refer to. That it was a joke. However, watching Quentin's video about the subject matter, it doesn't come off as a joking video. In my eyes, it comes off as more analytical.
I guess I've been doing YouTube so long and I've been researching the culture so long that I no longer see individual successes as actual representations of merit. Instead, I see them very cynically as repercussions of cultural events and changes on the website. PewDiePie is number 1 because around the time that YouTube switched from maximizing clicks to maximizing watch time, he started uploading long-form Let's Play content.
Obviously, I'm not going to play the whole video. If I did, not only would that kill the entire pacing of this section, but for the fact that Quentin has admitted taking down full uploads of the videos. However, nothing in the video comes off as a joke due to his tone, not understanding the joke or meme of the T-Series versus PewDiePie situation, and etc, etc. In the description I'll be linking towards 2 videos by 2 creators, Just Jargon and Mr. Obvious, who made videos talking about the T-Series video that Quentin made. Again, I'm not sure if I should link the video copy that I was provided, since Quentin has taken down direct uploads of it, but after how long it took to make this video, I'm sure as hell not gonna let Quentin take this video down. Again, his video doesn't come off as a joke, but he'll defend it himself by saying that it was. I mean, I could say a lot about Quentin reviews, and I have, but we're moving on. So, anyone remember Joseph Anderson? Well, he released a video talking about horror games and how they didn't scare him. I covered the video myself recently and also covered his response to the comments that he had gotten for that video. If you want more context of the situation, I suggest my videos, but his response to people calling out his rather off ideas about horror games was classy.
You thought the movie was just okay. Meanwhile, your friend turns to you and says, "That movie was really good." How do you respond? Do you A, disagree and have a discussion with them about it, B, ask why they liked it and hear them out, or C, rip off your shirt in a frothing rage and ask how dare they represent their opinion as objective fact, that they're a monster for trying to speak for everyone and declare the movie as really good? Then you launch into your rehearsed speech about how important it is to remember everyone has a different opinion, and I think you get the point of this exaggerated example.
And this is something I've kind of seen crop up a few times, especially recently with a guy named Snowman Gaming pretty much doing the same thing. And this is emblematic of a defense that people will often go to in order to deflect criticism, and that's to cherry pick.
Considering that you're watching this on my YouTube channel where I regularly present my opinions in videos, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, and you may immediately think that it's not fair to compare statements made in everyday conversation to those made in a scripted video. However, I don't think that's true, nor do I think you'd really want that if you fully understood what the result would be. First, let's demonstrate exactly what's happening. The video I released before this one is a great example since there are over 100 comments on it that address objectivity versus subjectivity instead of discussing anything brought up in the video.
As I stated in my response to the video, not only are there a number of comments that counter his complaints about people not actually arguing his points in the video, but he also cut context. I even had one of the people whose comment was highlighted come to me and say that he was talking to Joseph and was actually addressing Joseph's arguments to the video. Cherry picking was where you can choose and take what is available, and in this case, Joseph Anderson bloating up an issue more than it is. Even in his video, if you stop when he's scrolling through the comments, you can see that there are people who are actually addressing his arguments that he makes in his video. And nowhere does Joseph actually address these in his follow-up video. It allows him to actually point out that people are just taking the fact that he's using his opinion to express his views and complaints, when that's not just the issue.
I guess it's easy to win a fight with an opponent made of straw.
And in case you're wondering, the issue was with how Joseph structured his video. Like I said in the last chapter, if you're using evidence to back up your opinion, and if that evidence is false or faulty, or has contradictions to it, then it's not really an opinion anymore. Speaking of opinions, that's something that people will also use. Opinions are the things that everyone has, but once again, the moment that you start using it as a shield to deflect people's complaints, then it becomes an issue. And you'll see people often refer to the opinion card.
There are still a very few precious little petals on the internet that can't take the fact that people like and dislike things that they don't.
And they do this in order not to get criticized or be afraid of backlash. I'm sorry, but just because it's an opinion, that doesn't mean it can't be criticized. Once you put something out there on the internet, people will more than likely rip whatever product you have put out into many pieces. And what's ironic is that these people that use this are critics. They tear apart into products and explain why they are bad. Like take Mother's Basement, where he'll say this. On his Twitter, he'll proclaim that his videos are subjective, and yet you'll see this in his Goblin Slayer video.
But for the rest of you out there, the hardcore Goblin Slayer fans who just want to see the community around the series grow, want it to be recognized for its better qualities, and want it to make a lot of money so that more of the series gets adapted and more shows like it get made, please, don't let defending this one scene be the hill that you die on. Instead of acting like nothing's wrong with it or like people are wrong to be upset about it, acknowledge that it's a bad first episode, or at least a potentially offensive one, and try to draw people's attention to the parts of the series that you think they'll actually like.
Proclaiming that the first episode of an anime is objectively bad because of a singular scene. And yes, I'm aware of the scene in question, and if you're into anime, you know about the context of this scene. Moving on from the scenes that may potentially get my video terminated. And more than recently, we had someone like Snowman Gaming coming up about this, saying that subjectivity is implied. And the problem is that you can say subjectivity is implied, but you have to look at the actual context within the videos, what kind of language they're using, what words they're using. It doesn't matter if it's subjective implied, if what's in the video contradicts it, that's an issue. Again, if you're saying things are objectively bad, telling people that they're objectively bad, you don't get to play the opinion card, especially when you're shown to be dishonest when people are actually criticizing you. Keeping on the trend of Mother's Basement,
I'd also like to point out that in reaction to people complaining that Thanos definitely isn't the hero and so the title of his video was clickbait, he posted this picture on Twitter, talking about how the thumbnail used in the video isn't clickbait, because he actually only used the word hero instead of protagonist, because he couldn't fit the word protagonist onto the picture. Except that's not true, because if I remember correctly, he actually had a larger font size for the word protagonist just so it wouldn't fit on the screen. And even still, he could have just used a smaller sized font so the word protagonist would fit on the video anyway.
Then there's the most common defense, completely ignoring your critics. Now, out of all these defenses, this one should be the most possible to understand. Most of the time, these people who make these videos will often have a big audience, and it would be understandable that these people wouldn't be able to respond to every little bit of criticism flung at them by a near countless amount of people all talking at the same time at some point. No one has to respond to criticism. No one has to listen to criticism. No one even has to acknowledge criticism. But there's a but. A big but. And I cannot lie, you others can't deny, when someone walks in with an itty-bitty case and shows up right in your face, you get, who is Sans? This defense goes right out the window the moment you address any critic in any fashion. Not only you are acknowledging that the critic exists, but how you go about can actually make the situation worse. I've got a number of other examples for this one here, so let's start with someone who we already talked about in this section, Quentin Reviews. Where in my first video about him, and in one of my more recent vids about him, he has shown up in my comment sections. Oh, not to actually talk to me, but to sidestep and respond to someone else. And don't misunderstand, I didn't drive Quentin away. I actually attempted to talk to him in the comments, but he wouldn't respond. I wasn't rude. I wasn't trying to pick a fight. Did I make jokes at his expense? Yes, but he's made jokes at people before, so he doesn't really have a right to complain. He just decided to ignore me when I confronted him, and then subsequently refer to his critics as guppies on his Twitter account, and then block everyone in a short time later. Of course, people will probably turn to the example and claim that I am biased about this situation, and fair enough about that, hence why I have another example. So let's go back to HBomberGuy, who responded to another content creator named Mauler, who responded to his Dark Souls video. And essentially, this happened.
He acknowledged my existence again on Twitter. It was wonderful. Last time he spoke to me it was about my DS2 series, and in relation to someone saying they couldn't be bothered to watch any more than 10 minutes, he had this to say at the end of the conversation. Have you ever eaten something bad and stopped? Or realized there were 8 more courses and stopped? Because I think people who do that might still have some relevant criticism. And in response, I said, that is an interesting analogy, and had someone watched part 1 and offered criticism for it, I am sure it would be helpful. But to eat a potato and complain that the entire meal tastes bad is simply not useful at all. He chose not to respond to me again after that exchange.
Clearly behaving like someone who definitely isn't mad that they got owned online and just wants to have a reasonable conversation about the facts. I love being acknowledged by my peers online. It makes me feel powerful, virile even. I guess it's easy to win a fight with an opponent made of straw.
Essentially, you can't ignore your critics, but when you begin to snipe at your critics in order to make their complaints less than stellar, and that your audience shouldn't take their criticism to heart, well, I mean, don't get me wrong, reputation is all that's important on the internet, right? Especially when you're making big bucks. Look, like I said, you can acknowledge or not acknowledge criticism, but when you do get criticism and you think it's unfair to the point where you respond to people like this, you're better off just being in your own little bubbles and not attempting to take shots at people. After all, you might just burst that bubble and land smack dab into the field of cacti. And that's where the real pricks are.
Hey, hello, it me, Feghost. MangaKamen decided that it was a great idea to let me onto this video. Little did he know, he let the enemy into his base! I am here for critics! Frick you! Critics can be literally anywhere on YouTube. They could be 14 years old, they could have a British accent, they could have a Spanish accent. Nobody really knows and nobody really cares who or what you criticize. The most important thing about it is the views. And everybody wants views on this website, if you know what I'm saying. You want views? I want views. I could use for some more subscribers, but hey, that's what am I saying? What am I saying? What am I saying? Why am I turning? Any critic you come across could make the argument that indeed criticism is a craft. Criticism can be an art. Well, my argument is that it's not. You're literally just saying your opinion out into the void of YouTube, and whether it gets picked up by somebody or not, I don't really know, and I don't really care what happens from the causation and the effect of all that. The most important thing is, if you want yourself to be taken so seriously, if you want yourself to be a good critic, you gotta understand the industry you're criticizing in the first place. I see many people going after animations, having not been doing having not understand large scale animations, like Lily Orchard. They made the Steven Universe is garbage, and here's why. 2 hours long. I didn't watch the entire video, but it's very clear from the first 5 minutes of the video that Lily Orchard does not understand most of the industry. You may understand some of it, but not all of it. And you gotta sit down and really formulate your opinions from how the industry works. That's why you got big critics who were involved in the industry being taken seriously in the first place. You gotta have that connection. If you don't have that connection with the industry, then you're not going to be taken as seriously as the people who hone their craft in the first place. Directors. I want to hear from directors, not some guy on YouTube saying something about the new Star Wars film. I want to hear from the people who worked on it themselves. I want to hear from I want to hear from James Baxter working on Spirit. I want to hear him talking about how he animated those horses for hours on end and how what the process was. if I want to draw criticisms, I want to understand the people behind the work. I want to understand why that's so important, why it's all so important. I don't want to listen to some dude who just put the video together with some lo-fi hip-hop soundtrack behind it all. I want to experience what it was like to work on that movie. And that's the difference between creators and critics. Critics can be creators, yes, but they're not going to be good creators. Oh man, I am taking way too much from that Soul Brother video. Well, if you're trying so hard to make people take you seriously when being a critic on YouTube, then get involved in the craft that you're criticizing. That's what Nostalgia Critic did, and didn't do that very well. That didn't. Oh man, those movies were something else. But yes, get involved. Be creative outside of giving criticism. Be a driving force in whatever industry you're interested in criticizing. Just have that passion to do that. And if you can't do that, or if you're not interested in enough to do that, you shouldn't be criticizing it in the first place. That's just my opinion on it. And hey, we're all no stranger to opinions now. Man, I don't really know. Just get involved. Get more involved than just criticizing things, because that just falls on deaf ears. It's that's it. That's all I had to say. This was completely off the top of my head. MangaKamen Pee Pee Poo Poo 2019.
I'm pretty sure that everyone who is fans of the people I've talked about in this video aren't actually watching at this point, not unless they're open to listening to other people's thoughts and opinions. If so, well, thanks for watching, and if you're willing, I do have a single request for you if you are willing to humor me. Stop eating this kind of content up. Now that's not me saying don't watch it, that's me saying don't just believe what some internet personality tells you. Get varying kinds of opinions in the matter, and that goes for me too. Don't just accept what I say here as fact. This is merely an interpretation of how I view these videos that often makes me question whether or not I should be in a mental institution. But by that same token, hold these people, these content creators, to a higher standard. Don't deal with absolutes unless you're a Sith. And for some of these creators, well, to me, they're kind of a bit of an emblem as to why sitting through these videos makes me want to eye up that tasty red X in the corner of the screen. And that's kinda sad. Really sad. I've been watching YouTube ever since its inception, and one of the first things I ever watched on this site were reviews. Sure, it was originally just a place where someone could upload videos about elephant trunks, then I just realized the euphemism that I was about to type, and keep it in there, who cares. But YouTube has evolved over time. That's just natural. Personally, the website's degraded due to the way YouTube herds its creators into certain little boxes, and that's sad. You see people who have talent, people who can spend hours of their life in order to produce content that they obviously have a passion about. These people will have my respect in that regard. I mean, for some of these creators, that's the only way I can have respect for them. But for crying out loud, can we not just blindly accept what people say? Can we not just spread mediocrity? I will never tell people to unsub from a creator, unless they've committed an actual crime that can get people hurt. And I'm not gonna start now. I just ask that you people don't blindly believe what others say, nor actually spread around these ideas right off the bat. Don't just mirror what one person says about a subject. Don't just automatically assume that a product is bad just because one person of our group of people tell you that this one thing is bad. Don't just take their word for it. Observe their evidence. Observe the sources they have. Observe what they've said and how they said it. And for crying out loud, don't just suck up to them in the comments saying, "Now I don't have to watch the movie," or "Now I don't have to play the game." Have some semblance of dignity, please. And I want to point out, I don't have anything against people who have different views on things I like and dislike. What I am against is people misrepresenting what they're covering, as well well as the ego that they have while doing it. If I get things wrong here, I expect people to challenge the views I have here. I also expect people to refer to my video in some regard, much like how I refer to other people's videos in this. If you're gonna make videos like the ones I point out, be fair. Admit your bias. Source everything and don't cherry pick. So here's my final word. Everyone's a critic, and everyone has the right to express themselves however they want. But just because you have the freedom to say what you want, that doesn't mean you are free from being criticized. Opinions are not get-out-of-free jail cards, but people will play them as such the moment that people show the hint of disagreement or any sort of critique that is levied at them. I don't care if this video gets a lot of traction. I don't care if people ignore this. I don't care if it gets big. I don't care if this video goes viral. This is something that I felt needed to be said. This is something that I have to talk about, since I believe critique is a massive part of our culture, and I want to see better. The problem with this idea of criticism of others and of media comes from the odd idea of how it's said. I'm sure a lot of people will have noticed that I choose to reference Joseph Anderson in this video a bit, and there's a reason for that, and it's that I disagree on the matter of subjectivity in writing, and I would say that it's imperative to use subjective and objective writing at appropriate times for the sake of the audience clarity. And this doesn't just apply to Joseph Anderson either. Using the guise of everything is subjective right off the bat can be viewed as counterproductive, as the possibility of misinforming your audience comes up, much like how Joseph did with the game of Soma. There's also the use of buzzwords, big words, or even the tone of the critic likes to use, and they should be coming under scrutiny. They're just the script delivery. Essentially, they're just some fancy trimmings on the cover of a book. You need to be able to hear past the tones, the aesthetics, the flowery language, and really dive deep into what's really being said, since beyond the window dressing, there's where the content is. That's where the points are. Looking at the words that are being said are what actually counts. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can easily enjoy a critic for the aesthetics. But if you really take advice to the people when it comes to products, that you really need to pay attention to what they're saying. That goes for me too. And finally, there's condescension and how it's applied to the alternative perspectives. And while I have mentioned H. Bomber Guy, he is the perfect example about this situation, although he is by far not the only one who does this. In a lot of his videos, and most notably his Dark Souls 2 video, he will treat alternate perspectives like they're toxic pieces of garbage, and has asserted that people who do are, well,
objectively stupid people like Fallout 3.
And he'll do some of the worst things in order to do that. Like, take Matthew Matosis out of context multiple times. And hey, it is possible for this condescension to be used for comedic purposes, and I'm sure that's what it is. However, from where I stand, it's still a massive gray area. It's hard to understand if he genuinely means to insult people, since he's willing to take people out of context in order to make his points, but who knows? Look, at the end of the day, I just want better. And with this, I'd leave this video asking you, the viewer, a few questions. What do you want from mediacrism? Do you want the analysis to be fair? Or are you looking for something to confirm your opinion? Do you not want to be challenged? Or do you not want to have a new perspective on things that you love or hate? My goal of this video isn't to lambaste the creators that I highlighted. My goal isn't to raise the pitchforks. My goal is to see criticism evolve, to become better. I'm MangaKamen, and remember to examine your fandom.